So I'm very pleased to have the folks with us we have tonight. I will, as soon as I'm done, I will turn things over. Joe Meinhart will be in charge. He'll be the MC moderator for this evening. He is in the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies program at OU. He has been a Catholic priest, a Presbyterian minister, and he will be guiding us into discussion later. We have Damion Reinhardt, who's a member of the Oklahoma Atheists. That's it? Oklahoma Atheists group? Okay, sorry. There's several different ones, and I always forget which one. And he's agreed to join us tonight. We have Rick Anthony, who is a minister at Grace Fellowship Baptist Church. Is that actually in Norman, or is it? Okay, in Norman. So these are our guests tonight. I hope you will listen to them attentively and respectfully. And we will begin with Damion, I believe.
Excellent. Welcome. Greetings from the Atheist Echo Chamber, where we always say the same things over and over to each other. So much so that it was a challenge for me to come up with something that I could talk about tonight, where I could say I'm going to reach out to my Baptist colleague and say we have some common ground on some important issues. We're not here to discuss our differences, at least I hope not. That said, it took me a little bit to come up with some sort of theme that I could address, say, oh, here's things that we have in common. Now, I don't know exactly what we have in common, but I know what I can say I have in common with myself when I was a Baptist, what has not changed in my life since the 1990s, a glorious period. And a lot of things haven't changed. And so I finally came to a unifying theme, and it's the flag pledge. The flag pledge in its original form. Now, we might talk about the added language later on, but in its original form, it was, I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And that was the flag pledge as it was written by Francis Bellamy, a Baptist minister, as it happens, and a socialist, so something for everyone here. Within that pledge, there's nothing that I particularly disagree with, except for the intention, which is to get kids to do it. I don't think kids are capable of assenting to any of the propositions in that pledge, but that said, I think they're all good propositions, and maybe when they're in high school, they'll know enough to assent to it voluntarily. Allegiance to the Republic, to me, is a very important part of my life. I used to be in the Air Force. I know you might not guess that looking at me. But I do believe in the Republic and the values for which it stands. I like to think that I'm loyal to it in a meaningful sense. And I think that's something that we can build upon, something we could probably agree on. Certainly it hasn't changed for me. And now I have to go to my notes. Okay. Patriotism, I mentioned. Federalism, to me, is a very important concept. I think it keeps us where we are. It keeps a balance of power between the states and the federal government. And constitutionalism, that's something that I know progressives aren't really generally keen on, in the sense that constitutionalism is taken to mean originalism, but it can mean many different things. The American Constitution Society is a very progressive organization, and they're really keen on the living Constitution. So we can at least agree that constitutionalism gives us a baseline of values to work from. One nation, the concept of one nation. Now here we have the melting pot is the old concept, and the tossed salad is the new paradigm. I prefer the melting pot. That hasn't changed since I was a conservative Baptist. I know that many of you might prefer the tossed salad, but to me, the tossed salad is not unified in any particular sense, other than it's in the same bowl. The pieces are next to each other, but that's all there is to it, and they don't come together until they're crunched in the teeth of a crisis, whereas the melting pot gets to know each other. That's a cultural and a lingual unification to where we can communicate with each other using a common language, and where we get to have, at least to some extent, a common culture, which is to say I prefer the 4th of July as a common cultural artifact to the Easter celebration that you brought with you from Europe, or the Seder celebration that you brought with you from a different part of Europe, or whatever your own personal religious traditions are. So keep a hold of those. I'm more than happy for everyone to have their own traditions, but I think we should have common cultural values and traditions, such as those embodied in the 4th of July and the secular aspects of Thanksgiving. As to one nation, ethically, this is the most important point. We need to encourage a national ethic of mutual respect. In Northern Ireland, they had the prods and the tags, the Protestants and the Catholics, and they were mutually excommunicating each other and getting on with all kinds of violence. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., Protestant and Catholic were living happily side by side, serving in the military together, and generally getting along. Why is that? It's because we have this ethic of mutual respect and religious liberty, which never really caught hold in the British Isles quite like it has here. Another ethical point on which I think I can agree with all my Baptist friends is that of family values. And I really do believe in family values. I believe in monogamy and thrift and holding together as a family unit and all these things that maybe are less popular in our society than they are in Baptist society, where they're trumpeted as the greatest bedrock of civilization. Now, I don't believe family values have to be exclusive. I have a wonderful pair of lesbians that live next door to me. They have a 6-year-old daughter who plays with my 7-year-old son. And I think that they, too, can embody family values. But, again, we're not here to talk about differences. So, indivisible. North states versus the southern states, the red-blue divide, which is roughly the same map. I like to think that we should have indivisibility as a fundamental ethic as Americans. That, to me, is something that has never changed. And that's not just political, it's in every sense. Economically, we are indivisible. We created a free trade zone in the 13 colonies, which we extended eventually to 50 states. And now we're trying to extend further via treaties. But my point is that we created a union of states where we no longer taxed and tariffed each other to trade goods across the states. We knew that our mutual prosperity was indeed mutual. We're all in the same basket together. And of course, this also applies to diplomatic and military concerns. Oklahomans will go and fight when New York is attacked. Liberty. When we talk about liberty, we talk about personal liberty or civil liberties. We talk about economic liberties, the right to kind of determine what you do with your own salary and with your own future. And finally, there's liberty of conscience, which is to say, I'd rather that we didn't do Sunday school and public school and vice versa. I want the right to raise my children in the religious education of my choice. I think that I can agree with people of all faiths in that. We want to be able to raise our children in our own faith tradition and not somebody else's. And we really don't want our children to be a captive audience to somebody else's doctrine or indoctrination. So to give one example of that, the Quakers in Massachusetts did not have liberty of conscience, at least not at first. When the state was founded, they were generally persecuted, sometimes killed. We like to think of these Puritans as coming to this country for freedom of conscience, but really they were coming here to be free to practice their own virulent strain of Puritanism and to hell with all others, literally. And finally, justice for all. When I think of justice, I think of procedural and substantive due process. I think of the safeguards that we've built into our system, from juries, the rules of evidence. I think of the substantive principles of fundamental liberties that we've embodied in the Bill of Rights and in the state's Bill of Rights. And these sort of protections, I haven't changed on these issues at all. Since I was a Baptist, I still firmly believe in all of these liberties just as strongly as I ever did. I do have a slightly different view of what constitutes just laws, which I think we need to focus on as a society, is rationally discussing which laws are just and which laws are unjust. And as Wayne alluded to earlier, we aren't really discussing it. We're just kind of yelling across the divide. And we do need to talk seriously about which laws and policies are most just for our society. If I may allude again to early Massachusetts, at that time, when the Puritans had their way, idolatry, witchcraft, blasphemy, Sabbath breaking, and cursing one's parents were all capital crimes. You could be killed for these things. I don't think those are just laws. I don't think that they're rooted in any sort of rational discourse. They're rooted in a very literal view of the Levitical Code. I hope that Baptists don't still adhere to the Levitical Code and can agree that we need to move past that. So, that said, the last words of the original pledge were for all, which is to say that some of these values we can agree are universal. They ought to be consensual. We ought to agree to them voluntarily. And yes, they are aspirational. We know that this is not the way things really are. They're the way things ought to be. They're the way that we would like to see the country go. And while we can't agree on all the specifics, we can agree on the fundamental ethics that run through the original flag pledge. And if I could say one final word on under God, part of the flag pledge. We know that was added in the 50s as a concession to the Knights of Columbus, and everyone greatly feared the communists. I think we can agree that everybody should have the right to serve whichever gods they want to, without being forced to worship in any way that they don't agree to. To me, putting it in the flag pledge is a creed. It's adding a creed into the United States law. And I don't know if we can agree about that, but I just point out that it's something worthy of rational discussion. I don't expect to get to a meeting of the minds on it, but it's among the many issues that can be discussed. And that's it.
I really like the law about not cursing your parents.
I'm all for it, as long as I don't have to kill them.
A couple of years ago, I was driving with my son, my oldest son, and I got a phone call, and it was the city recreation department. And they were asking me if I'd coach one of the basketball teams of one of my kids. And I was trying to convince them that I couldn't do it. I always coach my kids' teams when they're in pre-K and kindergarten. I've always quit when we get to the point where I know that my expertise is gone and I know nothing about the sport, which is usually first grade. When we're sitting there in the car driving along, he realizes what I'm doing, and I'm still trying to tell the person, I really don't think I'm the right person, and all this, and he's just over there, Dad, no, Dad, and he's just over shaking his head and getting violent, and telling me no, and so finally I convinced the people, this is my wife, daughter here. Finally I convinced the people to call someone else, and what I do is, I've learned that you give them someone else's name, so I have someone else mad at me. But I get off the phone and I say, Caleb, what's the deal? Why are you getting so violent? He said, Dad, you can fake coaching soccer, you can fake coaching basketball. I mean, you can fake coaching soccer, you can fake coaching softball, but you can't fake basketball. When I got the call about this, I was kind of thinking, uh-oh, maybe I'm out of my league. And as Damon started talking, he was so intelligent. When Christy first asked me if I would speak, I said no, and she said, what can I do to convince you to speak? And I said, well, can you make me smarter? And Damion told me that he was a math person, so it scared me even more.
Makes for great public.
But I say all that to tell you that I'm going to just share my journey, and I don't have any answers. This is what Wayne said there at the beginning is exactly an area that I have been in, feeling like there's too much separation. And I can tell you where I'm at, what brings us to where we are, and kind of the journey we're on. I want to start off by saying I've always felt like in this area, the toughest group it is to have true dialogue with all the groups is probably Christians. And I would especially say even more probably Christians that I identify with. Those who have some set beliefs, which is mine, of some areas that in my church we call the majors. In our bylaws we have a thing called the majors and the minors. And we say in the majors we agree, and in the minors we experience love with each other, but we don't have to agree always. And on those are some things that we're very passionate about. One is about the triune God, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, that God created the earth, that God created human. That human decided to separate himself from God or turn away from God, which is what we call sin. And when doing that, separated himself for eternity, which is what we call hell. It's just, we believe it is eternity separated from God, eternal hopelessness. And that's where our passion comes, because we feel such a strong desire that no one ever have to experience forever eternal hopelessness. And that's important for me to tell you that as I go about telling you what I think is the biggest barrier for Christians in having dialogue. Not impossible, but in having dialogue. We believe that, and Scripture talks about hell and tries to give human identification to it. It uses a dump outside of a town that was mainly used for burning dead bodies and everything, and that's just like the worst thing. I personally believe that there's no way to describe hopelessness. And so that is where a lot of our passion comes from. I believe that God did not want that separation to be there, so he gave Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ lived a perfect life, chose to let himself be crucified to pay for our sins, we can then choose to accept that or not. Those things are major and bedrock to what I call, or what I identify with as Christian. Now, it's very important for me to start with that when I talk about what is the barrier. Because in believing that, we have the problem of whenever we are in society, there is a desire to share that with anyone we come in contact with. But just as much as I have a desire for everyone's eternity, I also have the very same desires as anyone else on this earth, that we take care of people, that we have health care, that we educate, that we don't have women being abused, or anybody being abused, that we don't have countries where there is genocide. And there is that desire. But for people that have a passion for eternity, and then when we start trying to deal with this earth, a lot of times those things, there becomes a conflict in how to deal with one without having the other take over. I think Christ had the very same conflict here on earth. When Christ was, after he started his ministry, I think we always see Christ being burdened by his compassion for people. Whenever he would go someplace, there would be such a desire to meet their needs. And we see healings, and we see, one time just feeding them. The very first miracle that Christ does is trying to help the wedding host out of not being humiliated at a wedding because they ran out of wine. And so there is that compassion that is there, even for what we would look at, or what I would look at as the most basic of needs, just humiliation, that someone would not have to suffer that. And am I running out of time already?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. I saw you move there. I haven't gotten to my point yet.
Oh, I'll throw something at you.
Okay, all right. But it's important that I tell you that, because I think that, as Christ was going through these and healing and doing all these, we even see sometimes when he would say to people, don't tell anyone that I did this. Because also he had the desire to share with people about God's love, and that God wanted to reconcile with them, and he was going to do that through Jesus Christ. And so as Jesus went about, he had the same battle that I believe, and this is my belief, that we have as Christians. That there's the desire to dialogue and to take care of the things here on earth, but also we have eternity that we are very concerned about. And even though on the news you hear of many people that claim to be Christian, that their motivation sometimes seems sincere, there are many that it is. And I would want to tell you that. So we have that burden there. The evangelical church, my interpretation again, probably you talk to most Protestant pastors, evangelicals, they tell you different. In fact, they're probably horrified that I'm the one coming to represent them. But I think a lot of times what we've done is we've used one to meet the other. We've tried to meet physical needs in order to get to eternal needs. The most blatant example I can think of is if you go into a big city and you have a homeless food kitchen. To eat there, then you have to listen to a sermon. And it's kind of like that way. I've often taken groups to do mission trips, and a lot of times we've gone just to do something that is building or helping or something. And I've had quite often people have a problem with that being our goal. Our goal should be preaching or sharing the gospel instead of just meeting this physical need. And so that is the battle that we walk, or the tightrope we walk. My journey right now, where I am, is I'm really trying to help our people, and that's all I can speak to, get out of that rut and try to figure it out. And let me just say, I'm in a very unique church. We are Baptist, but we don't tell anyone, and for good reason. But we really support many things that the Baptists do, but we also have many things that bother us. But we do hold to these majors. And even though in our church you'll have disagreement on many things, and you'll have disagreement on many things about political issues, when it comes down to the majors, those are things that are our center, that what holds us together and what we believe. And those are things we're passionate about because we care for people. And I don't say that as a knock to anyone that doesn't believe that way. You care for people, anyone cares for people too. That's how it plays itself out though to us, because that is very important to us. I see three problems, and I can really just speak to what I see as the problems with what I know. The first one is I think that we lack confidence. I don't think that many Christians feel confident in what they believe, and so therefore we're scared to even try to step out. In Southern Baptist, the statistic is that the biggest draw, there's another religion, I'm not going to name it, but another, we call it religion, they call themselves something else, but they state that their biggest convert base is Southern Baptist. And we always look at it because we aren't teaching what we believe. I believe it's not so much that we're not teaching it, I believe that we're not understanding it. And I personally feel that once we understand and are confident in what we believe, it doesn't matter where we go, and what we do, and who we interact with, as long as we truly believe. I think the opposite of confidence, whenever we're in a situation where we're not confident, we then become emotional or defensive, or we drop out. I think that's what's happened a lot in the abortion debate, and a lot of these. I think a lot of people have been told what they believe, and so when they don't really know how to define it, then it becomes emotional or defensive instead of understanding maybe why they believe something, or maybe even coming to the belief themselves. So that's one goal of mine, to make sure that the people I work with understand what we believe. Second of all, is there's a trend, and I think probably this is just in the last 2 decades, a trend towards isolating ourselves. And I think, Wayne, you alluded to that in the beginning. It's a lot easier just to be around the folks you agree with. And boy, us Baptists are good at that. In fact, I have previously been on staff at a Baptist church where I really got crosswise with most of the people there because I didn't really adhere to that. My wife and I are very supportive of public education and some other things, and came in disagreement with that. So we are setting out to try to figure out ways over the next year to really reach out and get ourselves out of. I preached to our folks the story of Gideon. I love the character of Gideon from the Old Testament. Gideon was probably the most insignificant person on the face of the earth, and God had him do one of the most significant things. And Gideon was the scaredest person ever. He was constantly saying, God, are you sure? Are you sure that I'm the one? But yet he would still go ahead and do it. And there comes a night just before their major battle, and God wakes Gideon up and says, and Gideon didn't even ask him this time, are you sure? But he wakes him up and he says, I want to show you something. And he takes him down into the camp of those who he's supposed to be in battle with. And I've been telling our people, I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to be willing to step out and go into places. It's a big deal for me to come here. My wife got a call today telling me that I shouldn't be here. Not from someone in my church, but somehow someone had heard that I was coming here from another church. And what did he say? I was stepping into
seed
the
of Satan.
I was stepping into the seed of Satan. Here it is. You can help us. I think we're so afraid to step out and get out of our. I'm sure it's probably even comfort as much as anything else. But we have to step out. We're taking on some projects in our community, trying to get us to step out. Our folks just took on working with the Youth Living Center. Blew our folks away at how much they got into it. In fact, we're setting up a meeting here in a couple of weeks to find out how much we can do more. And finding out how we can get out into our community and do so much more, not to do because we want to grow our church, not to do because we want to preach the gospel, but because we want to meet needs. And we want to do what we can. And I'm hoping that maybe that'll translate into the other. And the third, and I've just lost it. Oh, the third is what I call de-Jonifying the church. I recently took our folks through a study of Jonah. And if you go to this, Jonah had been told by God to go and preach about God and repentance to a city. And he didn't want to do it because he thought they were horrible. And he had decided that this was the worst group of people in the world, and God, through various means, including a big fish, finally got him there. And I just love the story, because at the end of the story, he goes into the city, they do what God wanted him to, and he's mad. And he comes out mad and never does catch on, and he's mad, not because God made him do anything, but because these people didn't deserve it. And one of my desires is to help our people quit labeling people as groups and start seeing humanity and start seeing people as humans. And instead of, I think that's what the church has gotten itself into with abortion and so many areas. We've labeled it as a political issue or as groups rather than looking at humans, homosexuality, anything, instead of looking at humans. And so those are three of my goals. Now the answer to our dialogue here, I have no clue. And so as I said, my son is sitting in the other seat saying, no, not you. Pretty much everything that Damion said, though, I would agree with, as far as these are things that we all have concerns about and care about. And quite frankly, I don't care if God's in the in the don't
You heard
turn
it here
Baptist,
first.
so I'm gonna put it on their blog. Because I know, I didn't even care if they put prayer in school. That wasn't important to me, because my kids can pray whenever. I laugh so much at my son, my 6-year-old son, or 8-year-old now. He told me the other day, the kids were talking about the moment of silence. He said, "You know what I used to do, Dad, when I first started?" And I said, "What?" He goes, "I actually prayed." I said, "Well, that's okay. You can do that." It's, to me, it's all. Anytime you institutionalize something, it diminishes the effect of it. That's all. Good. Thank you.